Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Ron Zaslow Interviews. My guest this evening is an attorney, an established boxing writer, and a boxing manager. His work has been featured on ESPN.com. He has also been quoted in KO Magazine and The Ring Magazine. And recently he was featured in an article which I was happy to write for Boxing Digest. He also represents several different fighters, including Winky Wright, Corey Spinks, Tarvis and Travis Sims, and Dmitriy Salita. My guest at this time is Kurt Emhoff. Kurt, welcome to the program.
Great to be here, Ron.
Now, Kurt, I'd first like to have you kind of get into your background, how you got into the sport of boxing, your love of boxing. I mean, I understand at one time you were actually a trivia champ as it relates to boxing. So why don't you give the audience a look into exactly how you got to this position?
Well, I mean, growing up in Pennsylvania, in Erie, Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania is very sports-oriented. I mean, all year round it was sports. It was baseball, it was basketball, it was football, and, you know, anything you watched on TV, you went out in the backyard and you did. So back then, in the 70s, you know, there were a lot of fights on national TV, so we'd grab the gloves and we'd go outside in the yard, and just happened, you know, I just loved the sport, watched a ton of it as a kid, bought every magazine. I was just a huge, huge boxing fan, and you know, that translated, you know, when I got to Penn State, you know, I kept up an interest in it, and Ring Magazine happened to have a national trivia contest, and I happened to win it. And, you know, my interest kept going. You know, I boxed a little bit in high school. I boxed at Penn State as well for a little while. And then I moved on to New York, went to law school, and while I was in law school, I wanted to stay in shape. There happened to be a Crunch fitness gym right around the corner from Cardozo, and I went in and, you know, checked out what kind of classes they had, and they had a boxing class. I'm like, all right, well, you know, that's right up my alley. And a professional boxer, Terry Sutherland, was teaching the class. So I knew who Terry Sutherland was. He never made it huge, but he was a fringe contender who fought on ESPN a couple of times. So I took the class and just started talking boxing with Terry, and he saw that I was really knowledgeable, and when he found out I was in law school, he's like, you know, I'd like to get into managing myself. You're going to be a lawyer. Could you help me out with that? And I was only too glad to help. I mean, it was like a dream come true. So I did. That's how I got started.
And as time went on, this developed into something more than just representing Mr. Sutherland. Right,
yeah. Initially, I helped Terry. We co-managed the fighter, but Terry was also still fighting, so I represented Terry as well for a little while. But eventually, you know, this led to writing for websites, and eventually a world champion who had been stripped of his title, Ron Millette, former junior welterweight champion, approached me. He had read an article of mine actually online, and he had just been stripped wrongfully by the IBF, and asked me if I could help him out, and that was pretty much my initial foray into big-time boxing. I was representing a world champion, and I represented Tehran for 2-3 years, and many big fights on HBO and Showtime. So that was kind of the beginning of stepping it up to the highest levels of boxing.
And your current situation is?
Current situation, I represent a number of fighters and promoters now. I represent them kind of on both sides of the table now. But I do some legal work for Winky Wright, who is the former undisputed junior middleweight champion, mostly on the endorsement end of things. Corey Spinks, I used to have a piece of his management. Now I handle some litigation matters for Corey. Dmitriy Salita, who's an undefeated local prospect here, great prospect, great personality. I mean, the rights to his life story have been sold, so he's got a great future. You know, we're trying to get Eminem to play him in the movie, so it's, you know, it's gone beyond boxing now. You know, there are other opportunities. So.
Well, let's talk about now what happens when a fighter looks to build a team. You know, when he starts getting into the actual business of boxing, he looks for management. He looks for people who are going to take care of him, like trainers, for example. Let's start with the manager. What is the most important thing that a fighter can look for when trying to seek out management help?
Well, really a couple of things. Competence and being able to trust the person, because they're going to be your exclusive representative. They're the ones who are going to be negotiating your purses. They're going to be negotiating potentially promotional deals, endorsement deals. So you want someone who's established, who knows what they're doing, who knows the ins and outs of boxing, knows the state and federal laws of boxing, can protect you in that way, and someone who can maximize your earning potential. Obviously, when a fighter is first starting out, when they're first turning pro, it's very tricky, because most times they're not getting paid much at all. So it's kind of important also for a fighter to look for someone who's going to give them a little bit of financial backing to get them going at the beginning of their career. So, you're looking for someone who knows the ropes of the sport, who can give you a little financial backing, and who can maximize your earning potential.
And what about the importance of having an attorney in your corner?
Well, as I stated, boxing is governed by federal. There are some federal laws that have been enacted that pertain to boxing, and almost every state has rules and regulations regarding boxing. Mm-hmm. And where an attorney comes in, they're going to be protecting your interests. There was an act that came out, the Muhammad Ali Act, that pertains to the rights of boxers and keeps them from, prohibits them from signing coercive contracts and so on. And in the New York rules and regs, it regulates how much a manager can take. And there's a lot of picayune little rules and regulations with boxing. And generally, your average manager doesn't quite know these things, can't really navigate them, and can't parse through contracts like an attorney could.